listeners, and welcome to an interview episode with the Arts Management and Technology Lab. My name is Alyssa, and I am the podcast producer.
Hi, my name is Brett. I am the Executive Director and Publisher for the Arts Management and Technology Lab.
In this episode, we are interviewing Rebecca Himberger, the Executive Director of Attack Theater, and Stewart Urist, the Managing Director of Quantum Theater, both located here in Pittsburgh. Today, we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of project management tools, particularly Airtable and Asana. We hope you enjoyed this episode brought to you by AnsLab. Okay, so before we begin, could you please take a moment to introduce yourselves to our listeners and tell us about which tool you have chosen for project management for your particular organization?
Sure. My name is Stewart. I've been managing director at Quantum Theater for about 3 years. And before that, I spent time in a number of other arts organizations, Ford's Theater Society in Washington, D.C., Broadway.com in New York. And I'm also a graduate of the Masters of Arts Management program. I'm really interested in tech tools, different things to help my team work more efficiently. Right now, I'm using Asana, and I use it kind of as a suite of productivity tools, but Asana is the main, project management tool that we use. And we find it's really useful both for kind of managing our own workflows and also for thinking strategically on kind of longer term projects and collecting all the resources to get those things done in one place and keeping each other accountable on meeting the deadlines to make it happen.
Hi, I'm Rebecca, Executive Director of Attack Theater. I have been in that role since 2012 and have been with Attack Theater since 2006. We use Airtable in a pretty robust way. We are a pretty dynamic and complex organization, so we have to manage a lot of ongoing programs that need, we have, I would say, 5 to 6 program managers who are simultaneously working on anywhere between 5 and 500 different programs that require management of guest artists and people and budgets. And what Airtable has afforded us the ability to do is to kind of track, and back to what Stewart just said, was accountability. And it's what we like about Airtable is it is kind of it's a more robust Excel, which is, we all kind of laugh, but when you're working with artists who are, and this is I really don't want to offend anyone here, but slow to change and slow to adapt to new tools. We've tried Asana, we've tried Trello, there's a lot of project management tools where all of a sudden it's shooting a gnat with a cannon. And it's like, here's this tool, and they don't know how to even, I hate to say this, log on, let alone use the tools that are kind of presented to them. Airtable was kind of essentially easing them into, here's a project management system that they understand. Use the parts of it that you can understand, can work within the limitations of it. And then if you don't like the parts and pieces of it, just kind of ignore them, and we'll build out the parts that actually make sense for us as administrators. So what we've done is essentially build a robust platform within Airtable that has, kind of forced some of our artists and forced some of our artist administrators to learn in our systems, how to better use project management tools within a platform that looks a lot like something that they've been working in for the last 25 years, which, it's I think, kind of the gateway drug to project management tools, if you will.
So could you tell us a little bit more about your specific organizations and what they're all about and what exactly their missions are?
Yeah. Quantum Theater is an experimental theater company those experiments manifest in a lot of ways, but one of the most visible ones is that we produce our work environmentally. So for 30 years, we've been finding non-theater spaces all over the city of Pittsburgh and transforming them, into the homes for our environmental projects. We just did a King Lear at iconic blast furnace, that's in the city. We've done shows in big cathedrals. We've done them in abandoned swimming pools. We've done them in city parks. We're always kind of moving around in that interplay between the plays that we produce and how the site informs them is really interesting to us. And our work itself is really eclectic too. We do operas. We collaborate with great organizations like Attack Theater on occasion. We do a lot of plays. Sometimes often brand new works, but sometimes things that are very critically acclaimed. So eclectic environmental experimentation is kind of our DNA.
Attack Theater is now celebrating its 25th anniversary, which is really exciting. We were founded almost exactly 25 years ago in 11 days. And we are a contemporary dance company. So our primary language is dance, although we partner with all different media, whether it's theater companies or visual artists, musicians, to create the work that we produce in and around Pittsburgh, in the region, and all over the world. We have three kind of threads of our programming: main stage productions, where we produce the work both in theatrical environments, whether it's the New Hazlet Theater here in Pittsburgh or in site-specific spaces. And we also do commissions and collaborations where we work with the Pittsburgh Opera, the Symphony, Quantum Theater as an example, and then other kind of non-arts organizations, whether they are social service organizations or environmental organizations throughout the city of Pittsburgh and beyond. And then another major component of what we do is creative learning programs, where we bring kinesthetic learning into the classroom to integrate movement into the curriculum. And that is generally what we spend our days doing.
For our listeners who aren't familiar with some of these tools, Asana is a project management tool that looks like a list of tasks, or can be viewed as tasks on a calendar, or can be viewed on tasks on boards. So anyone who's used Trello, it can mimic sort of the feeling of a Trello experience. While, as Rebecca said, Airtable is designed more as a visual look that it is very familiar as an Excel spreadsheet, but it's actually a robust database. And Airtable has actually been used in other ways where people have used more the database function, but the interface obviously is in the Excel spreadsheet. So does that make sense for how I explained it? Do you agree?
Yeah.
I'm looking over to Urist at the moment.
Yeah, I think that captures Asana pretty well. There is some flexibility baked into it. We upgraded, so you can have up to 15 users for free, which was an advantage at a free level that has most of the functionality. And that was good for getting used to this and trying it out and seeing if it works. But last year we did upgrade to the paid version, and in that paid version, there's some more functionality and reporting. But the one thing I note is the ability to add custom fields. And we've just kind of tapped that. But there's a lot of power, that people have unlocked in that, and also in kind of built-in Gantt charts for project management. If you're really big into serious project management with dependencies and timelines and stuff, which, I aspire to be there, but that's not my life right now. But you could do it.
I will add as well, before I pass this back to Alyssa, both of the platforms have a lot of integrations. They can both integrate with Slack. I know that Asana integrates with Harvest, which is a time management tool. But if you were investigating something that you want to add to operations you already have at an organization, you can definitely investigate what integrations are available on either tool. So,
All right, cool. So I'm going to throw this question first at Rebecca, because I know that you talked about how you integrated Airtable and basically had your coworkers just jump into it. Do you feel that overall Airtable has helped your team communication and has helped you guys do your job a lot more efficiently?
Oh gosh. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the ways that it has solved so many kind of so many different problems. We use Airtable for, I think a good example is we use it for payables and receivables. So, of course, we have our accounting system. It's not a replacement for accounting systems, but a great example is that because we have so many project managers who are simultaneously working on generating scopes of work and generating contracts and, out in the field, obviously they are not our bookkeeper, they are not our finance manager, they are not the ones who are actively working in our accounting system. So how does that information, when they're having a conversation with Alyssa, the teaching artist, and saying, okay, Alyssa, here's your scope of work and you're going to show up on these days and you need to do this thing. And Alyssa says, great, cool. How does that information eventually get communicated to the person who has to generate the contract, who then has to eventually cut the check, right? There's like 10 steps before check cutting, right? Obviously, there's kind of a chasm. And what we have learned over the years is that write it on a cocktail napkin or it gets communicated by carrier pigeon. Right. And there's a lot of assumptions here, but sending emails or, text messages or none of that works.
Oh yeah. It's easy for all that to get lost.
Lost in translation and communication. So we have a really robust payables and receivables contracts to generate Airtable where there's, scope of work, who's getting paid. The second that the project manager starts to put information to the Airtable and then tags the person who's next up to whether it's the contract reviewer, it's the person who needs to actually approve the information. Is it in the budget? I mean, then you get notified and you have to go in and actually approve it. It then goes into the contracts to generate piece. It's streamlined our process. Nobody has missed a pay date ever. I mean, and we work with hundreds of teaching artists, right? We're not talking about like 5 or 6 people. Again, if we were a much smaller organization, this probably wouldn't be, I would say, as necessary. But for us, we're talking about hundreds of people, right? And every week, there's lots and lots of people and lots of moving parts and pieces. And that's really necessary for us because we're talking about a huge scope for lots of programs and people and pay dates and right, like we need to make sure that we're really on top of that. Another good example is we use it for season planning, right? Because we have thousands of engagements, right? We're literally all over the place all the time. And so when we're talking about teaching engagements or commissions and collaborations or main stage productions, we need to make sure that it's not, we're not just using a Google Calendar, right? Because it's very complicated. And so especially when we're planning our season, we use it to make sure that we're tracking and planning properly. So we have a completely different Airtable that essentially charts out, because Airtable isn't just an Excel spreadsheet. As Brett was mentioning, it has a completely different view that you can look at, calendar views, which has really allowed us to think differently about our planning. And we share it with all of our artistic collaborators. So again, we can tag people in it. So if you are an artistic collaborator looking forward, we can plan and we can look at our 5-year kind of forecast in this way, which really helps us kind of think differently about how we're planning for the future and whether or not, and we use it for development also. So again, all of our foundation support is kind of overlaid on top of our 5-year plan. So like where do we have funding gaps for our, for the next 3 to 5 years? What are the things that need foundation support or corporate support or government support? Like it's really kind of changed how we're thinking about the future, which again is for us really important because it makes us accountable to both ourselves and of course to kind of all of our public support. So yes, there are like so many reasons. We also use it for hiring.
Oh,
yeah.
How
It's
does
so
that work?
whenever anybody applies for a job, it's the way that we track all of the applications that come in and all of the, so we upload all of the resumes. It also, it's just good so that nobody applies for a job and we don't say resume received. Thank you for applying. Did we actually get back to the person who applied? Really good place to kind of continue to track that information.
Okay. Well, so that's a really strong case for Airtable. Stuart, do you mind if I throw the same question at you for Asana? Like, do you feel that it has helped your team communication and helped you guys do your job more efficiently?
Yeah, it definitely has. I think listening to Rebecca and all the different ways like that she's using Airtable, there's a lot to be. What's striking me is the difference in like the breadth of the implementation that's at play here. I'm using Asana with my administrative staff primarily right now. I've not integrated the artistic side of it. I think as a function of how we produce our work. We don't have hundreds of collaborators. We have, maybe a couple dozen over the course of the year in these really intense engagements kind of centered on our environmental productions. So we do 3 shows a year, and we will find sites and we will create our shows in those places, over like a pretty intense 8-week period. So there's certainly all sorts of planning and logistics that goes into the lead time there. But those artistic processes, that's on our founder and artistic director and our director of production still really to drive those processes and to determine, how they want to marshal those resources. Although I'll happily be there waiting in the wings when they come knocking for Asana. But as of yet, that's not been fruitful for like our mode of working. But I think it's really interesting, the breadth of that implementation and the kind of like cross-company integration. There's a lot to be said just for, that type of like fully integrated approach. Some of the stuff is familiar, so like Brett said, the Asana, the primary ways that you look at it, right, are like a to-do list that you kind of tick off. And you can have sections in that in a project, or you can indicate like what a significant milestone is, and you can mark things dependent on each other. So it's a pretty powerful to-do list, but there's a linear kind of mode of thought that I think goes through all of the Asana programs. They all are, everything you make is basically meant to be a project that kind of has a beginning, middle, and end. And so that logic, lends it to planning, specific things. So we might have a project for our gala, which is something we're thinking about right now that's coming up in April, and there are, sections that are related to, the venue and all the things that have to happen there and whose responsibility that is and when it's due, and things relating to sponsorship and things relating to, marketing and promotion, print materials, all of that stuff can be tracked. Again, back to accountability, which I think we just both feel really, it's important to keep all those balls, moving. It lets you kind of see that all in one place. And it lets us know who is responsible and to track it there. But it's really the side sheets and, I wouldn't have like my budget like pulled into Asana. It would live on the Google Drive. I would know where it is. I use it more to track, how things are progressing along, and the individual data pieces might live elsewhere. I think like an exception is payables. I did, really it's so easy to drop a ball on a check if there's multiple people that have authorization to get someone paid. And as we've grown, that is the case. So there is a place where like those contractor payments now go, and that's my idiot check to make sure that goes in that, AP folder. So that check gets cut. I don't have hundreds of teaching artists, but I still have plenty of different artists that we're working with, and they all like to get paid.
Every time.
It's nice that you made them.
Yeah, right, yeah.
It's the considerate thing to do.
But I think, I think the implementation of Asana is a bit more constrained. I think we don't use it in as many areas. We use it to drive kind of our main projects, and we use it. I use it a lot on managing my team as well. I guess like having agendas I have like team meetings with, all of like my administrative staff. I have one-to-one meetings, and it allows us, if we have something we want to talk about, we don't have to pull each other out of our workflow, which, can be really disruptive. We can park it in one of those places like, hey, we want to dig into this. And it's, there on the agenda and visible, and we kind of can accrue things for each other there. So communication tool is like another way that it manifests for us, because those tasks lend themselves to commenting back and forth and, some amount of communication in that space, but maybe less to like the kind of database adjacent functions of like, what is the status that this grant is moving through? Mm-hmm. Or, some of those like totally integrated approaches that Rebecca was talking about.
So I want to kick in a quick question.
Yeah, because I had a question about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since both of you are using it, and fill in if this is not part of your question. Both of you are using your tools for HR functions to some degree. Meetings, one-on-ones, hiring, etc. So I've heard a lot of discussion of working with people, training artists to use this particular tool like Airtable. My question is, how easy was the adoption, or what was the process of transition into your institution, and what sort of training do you think it's an easy system to train up on? Are there hurdles to training a newbie into the system? So to talk about that, but and then we can.
It was not my question.
Okay, do you want to lead? If you're responding, again, jump in.
No.
Okay.
I can just, because I think for ours it's we give a lot of space for failure at Attack Theater as just kind of like a rule. It's like a general space of just like, it's okay to fail and you can screw this up and that's completely fine. So Airtable is another really good example, is that because we adopted it kind of all together, which was just like, here's this thing and we really want to try it because we think this is going to help our workflow. And we, especially coming from working with the artistic directors on this, like we really involved them in this process, which was like, hey, Peter, who's one of our founders, we think that, that crazy book that you have where you scribble with pencil and you carry it around in your backpack, wouldn't that be neat if this was also in an Airtable? Like, wouldn't it be great if you kind of dumped all this stuff in? And so he worked with Daniel, our marketing person, and Daniel kind of built this really slick version of it. So Peter has been working, and there's a Peter Airtable, and Peter just goes in and dumps it all in and uploads images. He'll do an image search on it, and it's really cool because you go into Peter's Airtable and there's all these crazy videos and GIFs and which is amazing because then you can kind of see Peter's brain in Airtable, which for an artist to actually see the crazy stuff he's working on that have no linear narrative, it's wild. It really is. And it's really cool because none of it is fully fleshed. None of it is a story. None of it is a show that we should write a grant for, right? So there's that. So kind of how has the training been when we have a new person that we've hired that's come on and we're like, this is how we use it. Here's one version. Here's Peter's kind of crazy Airtable version. And then here's also accounts payable, which is very much get the information in, people got to get paid, make sure the information is here by the time that checks get cut. So it's very much you can use it how you feel comfortable and ask questions because we're going to fail sometimes. And so the training has been very, I think, fluid in our organization.
I think the training's been pretty. Asana has nice tools built, like an orientation project that gets you through the basics and lets you practice clicking things off and creating things and doing sections. So it helps orient new users a bit too. But I think also our kind of constrained deployment has made that training pretty smooth. Because part of my onboarding with people, right? They do all their paperwork. We go through the manual. We make sure they get their direct deposit. We do all these things. We show them where the bathrooms are and where the light switches are. And then we talk about how we communicate. And Asana is one of those key tools. And it's this is a place that you will get deadlines, and that we'll be communicating back and forth. Or when we have meeting agendas, you'll look for the full staff meeting agenda here. You'll see our one-to-one meeting agenda here. So some of the stuff is really centralizing other things that would exist in most companies and just putting them into a place that is shared and visible. Instead of on my legal pad, that checklist lives in a place that I can see as the manager. So some of it's really intuitive, and then some of the others ways are self-serve. You have your my task. You don't even have to make that my task place visible. So by all means, use that however you want. Don't put it in a project. And then other stuff we've kind of learned together, like some of this project planning. That's been really, it is not so regimented for us yet. There's a way that this must be done with milestones and structures. I kind of orient them on a project is something that has a beginning, middle, and end. With the exception of these kind of recurring things like agendas and stuff. So we talk about how we think of different data hierarchies, but people can create projects to manage things in the ways that are needed. And so long as that is visible and I understand it, that works. we would just kind of bring them into like those more structured systems and the ones that are already in progress, but mostly, because like it's project by project, we're kind of iterating how we use it as we go along. And I think, getting better over time, hopefully.
My question for you about Asana,
Yeah,
because we've kind of put our feet in the Asana pool earlier on, and I think what was maybe unfulfilling for us, or was a big question, and then we couldn't quite get past that hurdle, was that it is very much beginning, middle, and end, and because so many things just don't have ends, right? They are either iterative or ongoing, or for us, it's long-term planning, and all of that. How do you use that to kind of to actually execute programming, and how do if things truly aren't beginning, middle, end, right? Maybe it's just middle, right? Or it is about planning, or it is about how do you use that as a tool to be able to, especially when it's in working with your administrative staff, where things aren't often programs, right? And that was one of our bigger challenges, where it's not always just like check the box because we've done a task. Does that make sense?
Some of the things are loose tasks that live in like kind of functional area projects.
Right.
I actually have just like a kind of general project with subsections for like, this is a marketing thing, this is a development thing, so when we're not so granular that I need someone to tick off every time they do an acknowledgement, right? Like that's just counterproductive. But there are like recurring tasks that I do like to keep an eye on, and I just kind of like things that are ongoing, like, like payroll happens every week, or like that kind of stuff can be set to recur, can kind of live in this limbo space. And I can see it in like their individual, like I click on their picture and see their workflow, and it'll still live there, and I know that they're aware of it, and I'll know that they tick it off. But the stuff that kind of goes on in perpetuity, I guess, like we still try and cook it down into like project chunks a lot of the time, I guess, because it is like, so really we are project a lot of the time, so it's like everything. I'm trying to think of stuff that like wouldn't fit into, so it's like the big strategic planning questions, I guess, or like the annual budget type stuff. That is a collaboration between me who uses the system and my executive artistic director, who doesn't use the system. So that's still a more analog process. So I don't feel pressure, I guess, to put it on there, because we have other ways of managing that stuff still. And those documents, live outside of the shared space. Although, certainly the directives, the strategic plan inform, what projects I'm creating and doling out to other people. It isn't, that's what struck me again about what you were talking about. It's like, it's really all ties up. And it all sounds kind of like visible, like in that hierarchy, from strategic plan all the way down. I think there is a level where like that highest level of like organizational imperative lives outside this space for us, and things flow down into Asana at the time that they become actionable, and we know like
and tactical.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But I think it's not. There was a time that I was kind of throwing this like higher level stuff in there, and then it would just like
sit forever.
Yeah, and then I'm like, what am I doing? I'm confused by this, and I realized this is a place where things go when you want to get them done and you want to shepherd them in a process to getting done. It's not so much a space. Although I've been messing with boards, and like there is some potential there, with that board space, because it feels more nonlinear, and you can kind of drag things like left to right along like a time, like you could create steps, right? And you could drag things through there. So there's ways that you could use it, I think. And there's a good Asana blog that like I don't spend as much time on as I should. And I just got an email for them where they're like, you're a nonprofit, would you like some like free like consulting on how to use Asana better? So I would, so I think we're learning how to, I would love to have it, that full company, full like top to bottom, but I'm also a realist on what works for different people's modes of working. There's some people who are just not comfortable, some artists who are not comfortable with technology, and I've not wanted to push them. Excel is scary for some of my folks.
Right. Well, and I think the thing that we find, and when we have what I'll say, executive level conversations, and so here we are, where yes, the C-suite, conversations, whatever that means. But I do think it's important that you could make every system, every tool, every project you could say, we have it all, And it is only as good as the people who use it. And I don't mean like your team, but it's only as good as the, like, we have everything, right? We've got Excel, we've got numbers, we've got Google Sheets, we have every computer, we've got typewriters, we've got paper, we've got pens, but if your team doesn't use them, they're not good. They are not good, right? And this is where what we heard in every conversation was, so we had a really robust Google Docs, Google everything. But what we were finding is that nobody was updating anything, right? They weren't being updated. So great. Okay, so that one's done. So then we tried Asana. No, that nobody used it, right? Again, it's like, it doesn't matter if it's never being updated. It's never being used. And so then we sat with the team and said, and again, it doesn't matter what I like. As the executive director, it doesn't matter what I like. If they all come back to me and say, we like pens and papers and whiteboards, but if they use it every day, if that is the system, and all they want to do is write it on sticky notes and hang it all over the office, but if that's the system, that's a great project management system, because if they use it and it works, great. You know what I mean? And so you have to listen. And so again, back to your point, is like, it doesn't have to go through the whole organization if your system is working, right? If it's on one side of the organization and the other side still funnels the information properly and you use it in the right ways. Like, we happen to make it work through the whole organization, or the parts that need it. So.
Yeah, and that's totally how I've thought about it, is like solving things piecemeal rather than trying to solve them all at once. Like Quantum's administrative staff grew and restructured significantly in the past few years, and then specialized really. We went from having like a few generalist positions really to now we have like a marketing person and a development person, and we have someone who's focused on community engagement. And I'm working really closely with all of them. So as we have that specialization, there is more of that need for kind of specific directed workflows, and this is really flowed out of that process, I guess, and growth with the company. Whereas on the artistic side, we've been making shows for 30 years and they always go up, and usually people like them. So like, to some degree, there's like if it's not broken, don't try and like throw a technology tool at it. But I do keep an eye out for the pieces that are broken. And when I hear from like a set designer, wow, these 100 email chains, these Gmail chains that are so long that they're splitting into another Gmail chain because they've gone over the limit. This is really disruptive. So, they're playing with Google tools right now, and they have some kind of, in recent projects have had some kind of shared documents, and that's been like a good iterative step. We were using Dropbox for a while for files, and I don't have no feelings for that. But, we get, as a nonprofit company, like you get the G Suite. Yeah. And, basically unlimited space. So now they have like a team drive where they can do stuff, and it feels more like a file structure that works for them, and it plays nicely with all the Google apps that everybody has. So, I am working with them on different sort of tools that serve their projects, but I have not pulled them yet into Asana, to actually manage that project process. Although something like a dream board, like you're talking about, that Peter uses, or I know there's other tools that have that kind of like, whiteboard kind of dream space feel, that might match more with the aesthetic and actually be useful to them. So I keep my eyes open for it, and I'm gonna like keep my eyes open at Airtable for them. But it's for what I'm doing, definitely it's needs following the form. Yeah.
So you both obviously used other project management tools and experienced technology at various levels. Did you have something that made you sort of click to, is there a financial or business reason aside from functionality and clarity that helped push you into this? Like, what was that critical factor? And if you were talking to somebody who's sitting out there with an organization that they're like, oh, I think project management, we really need one of these. Is there a decision tree that would help them do this? Like, what are those factors?
How much do you want to spend is always a big one, right? Part of that matrix. I know at least like the culture in the organization, we had our computers and like the basic office software on there, but we didn't like pay for cloud services really at all. So Asana was good because I could try it for free. And I think that's the case with a lot of different ones. But there's it's not just like a 30-day trial for free, I guess. Like there's a level that this thing functions for free for up to 15 users. And like, so that let us just assess really on like an ongoing way if it could work. And, and then crunching that cost, I can have like a year's membership for all my people for like $250, which is, reasonable for the amount of work that it gets done. So that's certainly part of what we were crunching.
We still use the free version of Airtable.
Yeah.
Because Airtable's the upgraded version just unlocks like colors or something. It's not worth. Sorry, Airtable. You're great. You should pay for it. But sorry. No, honest to God, we because we have recommended Airtable to so many people that we have enough credits to actually get the premium version. Like we have enough credits, and it's like, oh, you can unlock it now. Go ahead. And we like looked at it and we were like, we don't need it. And it doesn't like stop you from having. We have so many bases. We have like 900 bases in our Airtable. Like it doesn't stop you from. Yeah, I know it's kind of mind boggling. So I'd say use Airtable. Like go for it. There's no barrier to using it. And there's no reason to not play around it. There's nothing that stops you.
There's no user cap.
There's no user cap. There's no because everyone is an individual user and you invite people into your base. So you have a base, Stewart has a base, Brett has a base, Alyssa has a base, and then you're inviting. That's the whole. It's not like organizational base. So everybody has their own bases, and then you're essentially creating team bases based on who you're inviting into bases. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's definitely a distinction in how those two operate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say, as an Asana user, there's a similarity. You can invite members to a project.
Yeah.
So a project is like a base in some ways for Airtable.
Mm-hmm.
And you can invite unlimited project members. It's the overall owners. You can have that. So it has an interesting difference in that sense. But I'm also trying to remember, because I have looked at Airtable, and we will definitely share this out in the post that associates with this podcast, a comparison on pricing, because I think the institutional models for Airtable, they also have a nonprofit pricing, and they also have a concept that is more like what Asana is structured as sort of an institution into projects.
Right.
But the network of bases is a really unique and I guess horizontal way. So it's a very less hierarchical way of creating knowledge, which is an interesting system structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really don't need to pay for either of them, I guess, to get your toe in it. But that's like, it's amazing how much you're able to achieve, without on like a free pack. That's great.
Yeah. Thank you, institutions out there who offer free options and support nonprofits.
Yes.
Yeah. No kidding.
I think and you talked about trying a bunch of different things, but I think the other thing is like understanding like what you want it to look like. Like, do you love Excel? Does Excel scare you? Because you're going to be looking at a spreadsheet looking thing,
Right.
Do you like clicking like Asana has a linear feel, although they did add the boards and stuff. Trello never worked for me because like my brain doesn't work in that kind of like board sense. I was in a different organization to use that and it did not click. So I can't imagine managing like a team in that. Other things that like bring in, like Slack, which we use, for communication and just to reduce email clutter. They're trying to bring in some task management pieces to it, but that feels like such a noisy space that I can't imagine running a project out of Slack. Like, it's very good for chatter back and forth and for saving emails, but the integration is what I rely on to like kick that to like a measurable thing. So how you want it to look and like what you're trying to solve, I guess, there's a lot more customizability with Airtable, it sounds like, and from some of the other articles I've read to serve those different purposes.
Right.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today, for talking to us about all the project management tools, including Airtable and Asana. Thanks for listening to the Arts Management and Technology Lab podcast series. You can read more on the intersection between the arts and technology at www.amt-lab.org. Or you can listen to more interviews and discussions in our podcast series on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or Stitcher. Thank you for joining us.